Now available, paperback and Kindle Unlimited, ISIS, the main event. It's carnage inside of a steel cage when the goddess next door steps in the squared circle with the beast from the boss in this action-packed all-new ISIS series adventure. Get ISIS, the main event, paperback and Kindle Unlimited today.
I read a report somewhere that Dr. Britt Baker is coming back to AEW television. And this is an opportunity that Tony Kahn needs to use Britt Baker to make some of his up-and-coming wrestlers into stars. Now, with AEW, one of the problems that they have is that they have really good talent, but they really don't know how to book it. And one of the bigger problems that they have is that they don't know how to use old established stars to go out here and make new stars. And when I look at Britt Baker, I see an opportunity to take Megan Bayne and turn her into a superstar if he goes out here and creates a feud between Megan Bayne and Britt Baker. Now, when it comes down to Britt Baker, if she does come back, she'll be coming back to a completely different women's division than the one she was a part of when she first came to AEW back in 2019. Now, the AEW of the early 2020s was a very different division, and Britt Baker was the face of that division, being the first superstar signed to that division, and things have changed in the last couple of years since she's been on the air. And that needs to be the core of the story as related to Britt Baker and her return. It needs to be about her coming back and finding out that the whole women's division is completely different, and the way business is done is completely different than it was. And that's where Megan Bayne would be a good fit, because Megan Bayne is a powerhouse of a woman, and her whole goddess gimmick would really fit in with a story where she's looking to be the most dominant woman in AEW and sees an opportunity to do it at the expense of Britt Baker. And the Britt Baker Megan Bayne feud, I think, should start very much with a segment where Britt Baker is coming back to the division and finding out how things are different. And then Megan Bayne runs into her and just looks at her with a sneer and just says, "I don't like you." And from there, that's the start of the feud. And as Britt Baker is coming back, she's finding out that the division has a lot more tougher competition. She's finding out that women like Julia Hart have improved as related to their skills, and Sky Blue has come up to another level. And as this is going on, Megan Bayne is being booked as a powerhouse, basically having handicap matches where she's taking on 2 and 3 female jobbers, and eventually this leads to a confrontation between Megan Bayne and Britt Baker as related to things. And after they have that confrontation, eventually this leads to a first match, and in that first match, that's where Britt Baker basically is in for the shock of her life after having several matches where she basically barely gets out with the skin of her teeth as related to just roll-up pins, because that finisher of the lockjaw just ain't really working like it used to. And then she eventually has the match with Megan Bayne, who basically starts to use ring psychology on Britt Baker, where she makes it where she can't go out here and use that lockjaw because she winds up working that hand. And as she winds up working that hand, eventually this leads to Britt Baker eventually winding up in a situation where she's just, again, out of her league. And as she's out of her league, what happens is it eventually turns into a Crimson Mask situation, and eventually what happens is Britt Baker just winds up falling at the feet of Megan Bayne, who goes out here and uses her slogan as related to being the DMD, and saying that if she got in the ring with her, she would be DOA. And eventually that's what happens in the match. She winds up DOA in that first match, and that basically is the first plot point of the story arc in changing Britt Baker from a heel to a face, where people sympathize as related to the heart that she has in that match against the Megasis, as she has that heart in that match. And eventually, this starts the slow face turn storyline for Britt Baker as she faces this irresistible force, of a woman who goes out here and continues her dominance. And as she continues her dominance, this is what's going to lead to her being seen as a rising star, because this whole match would symbolize the end of the old AEW women's division and show how much the AEW women's division has changed and how Britt Baker basically has to change if she wants to be a part of the AEW women's division at this point. And that's where the character transformation arc for Britt Baker really starts to kick in. That's where the feud starts to really get more serious, because this is where Britt is looking at herself after being completely destroyed by Megan Bayne in that match. And after being completely destroyed in that match, she basically has to start thinking that maybe she's not cut out for AEW, and basically winds up going to Tony Kahn, looking to get out of her kayfabe contract. And as she looks to get out of the kayfabe contract, Tony Kahn basically tells her she's still under contract, and she winds up basically trying to plead to try to find a way out, and winds up doing broadcast booths on Collision, which eventually leads to Megan Bayne still looking to go after her. And looking to get her out of AEW, looking to say that if she takes down the most dominant woman, she will become the new boss over the women's division. And that's where the feud really starts to kick in, because you have a scared Britt Baker facing off against Megan Bayne, and as they facing off in different segments. This is building up to another a part of the feud. And as the feud is going on, we eventually find Britt Baker cowering in a bathroom, and that's where Megan Bayne and Penelope Ford basically wind up giving her a swirly in the toilet and leave her laid out in the bathroom, which leads to basically the second match. And the second match is where we start to see more of a character transformation arc as related to the Britt Baker, realizing that she can't get out of this whole situation, and she's going to have to change her game. And as she winds up changing her game, again, this is where Megan is continued to be built up as a threat, continues to be built up as this threat, but Britt's learning how to come up with different things, realizing that the lockjaw finisher basically ain't going to cut it. She's going to have to come up with something new, and again, this allows her character to evolve, and as her character evolves, eventually this leads to the second match, which ends in a draw, or basically as related to things. And as that goes on, this eventually leads to the feud continuing. And as the feud continues, we get to the third match, and the third match basically is the one that's going to build into another violent climax with another Crimson Mask for Britt Baker. But eventually she does manage to survive and manages to eventually get a win over Megan Bayne at this point, who will eventually have been turned into this monster goddess, a monster goddess and a legitimate threat, and someone who will be seen as a serious contender for the AEW women's title. And Britt Baker would be seen as a serious star, but she would be on the face side now as a hero, and that puts her in contention to be someone that Tony Kahn can go out here and put in the main event as related to the women's division. And it also makes the women's division look like it's a more serious place, and also ties into the history of the AEW women's division. That's the way I would do things if I were booking over at AEW. I mean, one of the big mistakes that Tony Kahn makes usually is not understanding how to go out here and use his stars to go out here and make new stars. And Megan Bayne is a woman who has a lot of promise and could be a big star, but she needs the type of feuds and matches that would allow her to be seen as someone who needs to be taken seriously. And Britt Baker is the star who, again, is at this point where she's already over, But as someone who is over, your job is to put over others, the other wrestlers, so that they can go out here and be the stars. That's what the business is all about. And again, both wrestlers would get the rub and basically be contenders for the main event. That's what should be done, as I see it, as related to Britt Baker if she does return. The first thing they do need to do is, again, build her slowly into this feud with Megan Bayne, and the goal is to make Megan Bayne into a star. That's the goal of this whole feud, is to make Megan Bayne into a star that would be ready to contend for the main event and the women's title, and make it where eventually it pays off in a pay-per-view match eventually down the road, where Britt Baker and Megan Bayne eventually come back once again in the feud for the women's title. Again, if you set this up nice and slow, it'll eventually pay off very well, and pay off where you get 3, 4, maybe 5 matches between the same wrestlers, and basically tell a great story with those wrestlers. And also, as you're doing these stories, again, you can go out here and get over other stars like Tekla and the Triangle of Madness. Put them in a couple of matches for the feud with Britt Baker as related to her face turn. Again, there's ways of doing this and making it really go well, but Tony Kahn really have to understand the importance of story. He usually focuses on wrestling, but the focus needs to be on story, and story is the thing that's going to draw people in, and that's how you go out here and make bigger stars as related to everything. I mean, Toni Storm showed, as related to her characters are the big draw for the women's division, and you really do need to focus on story more. And AEW's greatest weakness is the lack of story. The lack of story all around in getting over their stars. They've got the wrestlers, but they just need to take the time to develop stories the way that WWE did with Roman and Cody. And I believe a Britt Baker Megan Bayne feud could be as big as a Roman and Cody feud if you did the storytelling right. If you did the storytelling right, it could be like the Roman and Cody or the TNA Knockouts division, where storytelling was everything. And when it comes down to Britt Baker, again, she has that potential to be, again, a big star if they booked her right. And that was shown with the whole Thunder Rosa feud, where there was a story. And right now, if you're going to bring her back, you got to bring her back with an effort towards putting over other female wrestlers, and also showing how much the AEW women's division has changed for the better, and how different things are than they were back in 2019. And if you did that, again, Tony Kahn would be able to get AEW's ratings out of the toilet as related to 300,000 views for Dynamite and maybe 250 for Collision. Again, these are numbers that basically YouTubers get, and even AEW Dark was getting, and you got to get the numbers up, and the way you get the numbers up is with a good story. You got to get the stories going as related to AEW. That's their Achilles heel, is that they don't go out here and develop characters. I mean, the wrestlers are there, like with Sammy Guevara, and I had an idea for a Sammy Guevara development where, again, we give him a new gimmick where he's more of a guy with a dream of being the AEW champion. He's one of the 4 pillars, and you have this guy with this dream. And again, you could take these, if you create characters and create stories for them at AEW could possibly give WWE a serious run for their money. Now, if you want to check out my book that pays tribute to my love for pro wrestling, ISIS the Main Event, you can find that book on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format, and you can also find it at other online booksellers like Draft Digital, Google Play, Barnes & Noble, and big box retailers like Walmart and Target. And if you want to check out other books in the SJS Direct universe, you can find those books along with in the ISIS series, the Esteem series, the John Haynes series, and Spinsterella series on Amazon.com, along with the ISIS book, ISIS the Main Event. And you can also pick up many of my men's issues books as well, and other online booksellers. And if you want to see me make more videos talking about wrestling, now these videos really don't get that many views, you can go out here and drop a donation to the Patreon, the PayPal, or the Cash App by clicking the link in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.
Now available in paperback and e-readers, Isis, the Beauty Myth. Learn the beauty secrets of the goddess next door in this action-packed Isis series adventure. Get Isis, the Beauty Myth at online booksellers everywhere today.
Coming to paperback and e-readers, the Steam Season of the Witch Girl. The aspiring angel takes on a wicked teenage witch in this action-packed all-new Esteem series adventure. Pre-order your copy of Esteem Season of the Witch Girl at Amazon.com and other online booksellers. Now available in paperback and e-readers, Esteem Horror in the Hamptons. The aspiring angel tries to escape a house of horrors in this action-packed, all-new Esteem series adventure. Get your copy of Esteem Horror in the Hamptons in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers everywhere. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.